The city of Neoterra buzzed with life, its towering skyscrapers glowing like beacons against the night sky. Neon lights reflected off rain-slick streets as hovercars zipped through the airways above. It was a place where humanity mingled with technology, and dreams often clashed with reality. Among the millions who called this futuristic metropolis home was Kale, a young courier known for his quick reflexes and sharp instincts. Kale had spent most of his life navigating the labyrinthine alleys and bustling markets of Neoterra. He wasn't rich or famous, just another face in the crowd, but he took pride in his work. Delivering packages across the sprawling city kept him busy and helped him stay out of trouble. Tonight, however, fate seemed determined to pull him into something far beyond his usual routine. It started with a simple delivery job. A client had requested that a small package be dropped off at an old warehouse on the outskirts of town. The address raised some red flags. It was located in one of the seedier parts of the city, where shadows lingered longer than they should. But Kale shrugged it off. Jobs like these paid well, and he needed the credits. As he approached the warehouse, the hum of distant machinery filled the air. The building loomed ahead, its windows dark and broken, giving it an eerie appearance. Kale parked his hoverbike behind a stack of crates, ensuring it wouldn't attract attention. He grabbed the package from the compartment beneath the seat and made his way toward the entrance. Inside, the warehouse was dimly lit, the only source of light coming from flickering overhead bowls. Rows of rusted shelves stretched into the darkness, creating narrow corridors that felt almost claustrophobic. Kale moved cautiously, his footsteps echoing softly against the concrete floor. Something about the place didn't sit right with him, but he pushed the feeling aside and focused on completing the task. Just as he reached the designated drop-off point, a sudden noise startled him, a soft thud followed by the sound of hurried footsteps. Kale froze, his heart pounding in his chest. Slowly, he turned around, scanning the shadows for any sign of movement. At first, he saw nothing. Then, out of the corner of his eye, he caught a glimpse of someone darting between the shelves. "Who's there?" Kale called out, his voice steady despite the unease creeping up his spine. No answer came, but the footsteps grew louder, accompanied now by the unmistakable clanking of metal. Kale's instincts screamed at him to leave, but curiosity held him in place. He stepped forward cautiously, following the sound until he rounded a corner and came face to face with a woman. She looked disheveled, her clothes torn and dirt smudged across her pale skin. Her hair, a cascade of silver strands that shimmered faintly under the dim light, framed a face both beautiful and haunting. But what struck Kale most were her eyes. They glowed faintly, an otherworldly hue that sent a shiver down his spine. Before he could say anything, she pressed a finger to her lips, signaling for silence. Behind her, the sound of heavy boots echoed through the warehouse, growing closer with each passing second. Kale's mind raced. Whoever, or whatever, was chasing her clearly meant business. "We need to go." Now the woman whispered urgently, her voice low but firm. Without waiting for a response, she grabbed Kale's arm and pulled him deeper into the maze of shelves. They moved quickly, weaving through the narrow pathways as the sounds of pursuit intensified. Kale glanced over his shoulder and saw figures emerging from the shadows. Men clad in black armor, their faces obscured by helmets equipped with glowing visors. They carried weapons unlike anything Kale had ever seen, sleek and deadly looking, pulsing with an ominous blue light. "What did you do to piss them off?" Kale asked breathlessly as they sprinted through the warehouse. "I didn't have time to explain earlier," the woman replied, her tone clipped. "But trust me, you don't want to stick around and find out." Kale wanted to argue, to demand answers, but the urgency in her voice stopped him. Instead, he focused on keeping up with her as they reached the far end of the warehouse. There, hidden behind a pile of discarded machinery, was a service door leading outside. The woman pushed it open, revealing a narrow alley bathed in moonlight. They slipped through just as the armored figures burst into view. shouting commands in a language Cale couldn't understand. He hesitated for a moment, watching as the pursuers spread out, searching for their quarry. Then, without thinking, he slammed the door shut and used a nearby crate to block it. "That won't hold them for long," the woman said, already moving down the alley. "Come on." Cale followed, adrenaline coursing through his veins. They ran through the twistings, treats, dodging pedestrians, and leaping over obstacles. The woman seemed to know exactly where she was going, her movements fluid and precise. Cale struggled to keep pace, his lungs burning with exertion. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, they ducked into a secluded alcove. The woman leaned against the wall, catching her breath while keeping a wary eye on the street. Cale slumped beside her, his mind reeling from everything that had happened. "Okay," he said after a moment, his voice tinged with frustration. "You owe me an explanation. Who are you? And why are those guys after you?" The woman hesitated, her glowing eyes locking onto his. For a brief moment, Cale thought she might refuse to answer. But then she sighed, her shoulders sagging slightly. "My name is Lyra," she said softly. "And let's just say I'm not from around here." Cale blinked, unsure if he'd heard her correctly. Before he could press further, the distant wail of sirens cut through the air, signaling the arrival of local law enforcement. Lyra straightened, her expression hardening. "We can't stay here," she said. "They'll find us if we do." Cale nodded reluctantly. As much as he wanted answers, survival took priority. Together, they'd melted back into the shadows, disappearing into the chaotic sprawl of Neoterra. Little did Cale know, this was only the beginning of a journey that would change his life forever. The city streets blurred into a haze of neon lights and hurried footsteps as Cale and Lyra wove through the crowded alleys of Neoterra. The distant hum of hovercars overhead mingled with the cacophony of voices below, creating a chaotic symphony that masked their escape. For now, they were safe, but Cale knew it wouldn't last long. Eventually, they reached his small apartment tucked away in one of the less glamorous corners of the city. It wasn't much. A single room cluttered with gadgets, spare parts, and a few personal belongings. But it was home. More importantly, it was hidden, far from prying eyes or surveillance drones. As Cale locked the door behind them, he turned to find Lyra standing near the window, her glowing eyes scanning the street below. "You can relax for a bit," Cale said, trying to sound reassuring despite the storm of questions swirling in his mind. "No one knows about this place." Lyra glanced at him briefly before returning her gaze to the window. Her expression was unreadable, a mix of caution and exhaustion etched onto her delicate features. She didn't respond, but Cale noticed how tightly she clutched the edges of her torn jacket, as if bracing herself for something, or someone, to burst through the door at any moment. "Look," Cale continued, leaning against the wall and crossing his arms. "You don't have to tell me everything right now, but you owe me something. Who are those guys? What do they want from you?" Lyra hesitated, her lips parting slightly as though she were weighing her words carefully. Finally, she spoke, her voice soft yet steady. "They're dangerous and persistent. They won't stop until they catch me." "That's not an answer," Cale shot back, frustration creeping into his tone. "Why are they after you? Did you steal something? Are you some kind of criminal?" To his surprise, Lyra let out a faint laugh, though there was no humor in it. If only it were that simple. Cale frowned, his curiosity piqued even further. He opened his mouth to press her, but before he could say anything, Lyra suddenly winced, clutching her arm. Cale stepped closer, alarmed. "What's wrong?" he asked. "It's nothing," Lyra muttered, pulling her sleeve up to reveal a nasty gash on her forearm. The wound looked deep, jagged, and caked with dirt, evidence of their earlier run-in with danger. Cale grabbed a first aid kit from a nearby shelf and knelt beside her. "Let me clean that," he insisted. "You don't need an infection on top of everything else." Lyra hesitated again, but eventually nodded. As Cale dabbed antiseptic onto the wound, he couldn't help but notice something strange. Instead of flinching or showing signs of pain, Lyra simply watched him with an unreadable expression. Even more bizarrely, the bleeding had already slowed to a trickle, and the edges of the cut seemed to be closing up before his very eyes. "What the?" Cale trailed off, staring at her arm in disbelief. "How is this possible?" Lyra pulled her sleeve down quickly, avoiding his gaze. "It's complicated." "Complicated," Cale echoed, his voice rising slightly. "You expect me to believe that your arm heals itself faster than normal? That's not just complicated, Lyra. That's impossible." She sighed, running a hand through her silvery hair. "Not where I come from." Cale froze, his mind racing. "Wait, what did you just say?" For a moment, Lyra didn't respond. Then, slowly, she met his gaze. Her glowing eyes seemed to pierce straight through him, filled with both vulnerability and resolve. "I told you earlier, I'm not from around here. Not from this world, anyway." Cale stared at her, his thoughts tumbling over each other like dominoes. Alien invasions and interstellar travel were common themes in Hollywoods and novels, but he'd never imagined encountering someone, or something, like Lyra in real life. Yet the evidence was undeniable. Her unnatural healing ability, her luminous eyes, and the advanced technology wielded by her pursuers all pointed to one conclusion. "You're an alien." Cale finally managed to choke out, his voice barely above a whisper. Lyra nodded, her expression wary. "Yes, but please, hear me out before you decide what to do with me." Cale sank onto the edge of his cot, his head spinning. Part of him wanted to bolt out the door and never look back. Another part, the stubborn, curious part that had gotten him into trouble countless times before, wanted answers. He gestured for her to continue. "My people come from a planet called Lumina," Lyra began, her voice taking on a nostalgic tone. "It's a world of light and harmony, where energy flows freely and sustains all life. We've lived peacefully for centuries, untouched by war or greed, until recently." Her expression darkened as she continued. "A faction within our society sought power beyond measure. They discovered a way to harness the core of our planet, an ancient source of infinite energy, and use it as a weapon. When my family refused to comply, chaos erupted. My parents, they sacrificed themselves to protect me. Now, I carry vital information encoded within my neural patterns, information that could restore balance to my world." Cale listened intently, his initial shock giving way to awe. "So those guys chasing you, they're from your planet?" "Yes," Lyra confirmed. "They'll stop at nothing to retrieve the data I hold. If they succeed, Lumina will fall completely under their control. And if they discover Earth..." She trailed off, leaving the implication hanging heavy in the air. Cale felt a chill run down his spine. The thought of an alien invasion targeting humanity made his stomach churn. But even more unsettling was the realization that Lyra trusted him enough to share her story. Despite her otherworldly origins, she seemed genuinely afraid and desperate for help. "I can't promise I'll understand everything," Cale said after a long pause. "But I can promise I won't turn you over to them. Not after hearing this." Lyra's eyes softened, gratitude flickering across her face. "Thank you, Cale. You have no idea how much that means to me." As the night wore on, Cale found himself drawn into conversation with Lyra, learning more about her culture and the wonders of Lumina. She spoke fondly of its shimmering landscapes, its vibrant cities powered entirely by renewable energy, and its people's commitment to unity and peace. In return, Cale shared stories of Earth, its struggles, its resilience, and its boundless potential. Despite their differences, they discovered a surprising connection, forged in the shared hope for a better future. But their moment of calm was short-lived. Just as dawn began to break, casting a pale light through the grimy window, a loud thud shook the building. Kale and Lyra exchanged a glance, both knowing exactly what it meant. "They found us," Lyra whispered, her voice tense. The thud echoed through the building like a warning bell, sending a jolt of adrenaline coursing through Cal's veins. He glanced at Lyra, who was already on her feet, her glowing eyes scanning the room for an escape route. Her calm demeanor masked the tension in her posture, and Cal couldn't help but admire her composure despite the looming danger. "They're here," she said quietly, her voice laced with urgency. "We need to move. Now." Cale nodded, grabbing a small toolkit from the corner of the room. It wasn't much, but it contained a few gadgets he could use to buy them some time. Together, they moved toward the back window, which overlooked a narrow alley below. The drop wasn't too far, but the ground was littered with debris, making it risky. "Can you jump?" Cale asked, glancing at Lyra. She gave him a wry smile. "I'll manage." Without another word, they climbed onto the windowsill and leaped into the alley. Cale landed awkwardly, rolling to absorb the impact, while Lyra landed gracefully, as if gravity itself bent to her will. They didn't waste a second, sprinting down the alleyway just as shouts erupted from inside the building behind them. "They're coming," Cale shouted, his heart pounding as he heard boots clattering against metal stairs. Their pursuers were close, too close. Lyra grabbed his hand and pulled him into a side passage, weaving through piles of trash and discarded machinery. Cale followed without question, trusting her instincts even though every fiber of his being screamed to stop and fight. But deep down, he knew that wouldn't end well, not against enemies armed with alien weapons capable of tearing through steel. As they ran, Cale noticed something strange about Lyra. She seemed to know exactly where she was going, turning corners and ducking into shadows with precision. It was almost as if she'd memorized the layout of the city beforehand, or perhaps she had abilities beyond what she'd revealed so far. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, they'd reached a dead-end alley blocked by a chain-link fence topped with razor wire. Cale cursed under his breath, looking around for another way out. But before he could suggest doubling back, Lyra raised her hands and closed her eyes. A soft hum filled the air, and to Cal's astonishment, the fence began to shimmer and dissolve, creating a gap wide enough for them to slip through. "What? How did you do that?" Cale stammered, staring at the spot where the fence had been moments ago. "I told you," Lyra replied, her tone matter-of-fact. "Things are different where I come from." Cale didn't have time to dwell on the implications. They slipped through the opening and emerged onto a quiet street lined with abandoned warehouses. For a moment, the only sound was the distant hum of hovercars overhead. Then, suddenly, a shadowy figure stepped into their path, a man clad in black armor, his helmet gleaming menacingly under the dim streetlights. "You can't run forever," the figure growled, raising a weapon that pulsed with an ominous blue light. Behind him, more armored figures appeared, cutting off their escape routes. Cale instinctively stepped in front of Lyra, shielding her with his body. His mind raced, searching for a plan, any plan, that might get them out of this mess. But before he could act, Lyra placed a hand on his shoulder, gently pushing him aside. "Stay back," she whispered. "Let me handle this." Before Cale could protest, Lyra stepped forward, her glowing eyes locking onto the leader of the group. The air around her seemed to crackle with energy, and a faint aura enveloped her form. Without warning, she raised her arms, and a wave of blinding light surged outward, engulfing the attackers. When the light faded, the armored figures lay unconscious on the ground, their weapons reduced to smoldering husks. Cale stared at her, speechless. You did that." Lyra nodded, lowering her arms. "It's part of who I am, but using my powers comes at a cost. I can't keep doing it indefinitely." Her words sent a chill down Cal's spine. If Lyra's abilities had limits, then they were still vulnerable. And worse, their actions tonight would surely draw even more attention to them. "We need to find allies," Cale said firmly. People who can help us fight back. Lyra hesitated, then nodded. There's a resistance movement operating underground. They've been fighting the same faction that overthrew my people. If anyone can help us, it's them. With renewed determination, they set off toward the coordinates Lyra provided. After navigating through several winding streets and avoiding patrols, they arrived at a nondescript door hidden beneath a flickering neon sign. Cale knocked cautiously, and after a moment, the door creaked open to reveal a middle-aged woman with sharp features and piercing green eyes. "Who are you?" the woman demanded, her hand resting on a holstered blaster. "My name is Lyra," she replied calmly. "And this is Cale. We need your help." The woman studied them for a long moment before stepping aside to let them in. Inside, the space was bustling with activity. Rebels worked at makeshift stations, repairing equipment, analyzing data, and strategizing plans. Despite the chaos, there was an underlying sense of purpose, a shared mission to resist oppression. The woman introduced herself as Dr. Elise Marrow, the leader of the resistance. She listened intently as Lyra explained her situation, occasionally nodding or asking clarifying questions. When Lyra finished, Elise leaned back in her chair, her expression thoughtful. "So, you're an alien princess carrying vital information that could restore peace to your world," Elise summarized. "And those goons outside are hunting you because they want to exploit your planet's core energy." "Yes," Lyra confirmed, "but their ambitions don't stop there. If they succeed, Earth could become their next target." Elise sighed, rubbing her temples. "This complicates things. Helping you means putting ourselves at greater risk. But if what you say is true, then we don't have a choice." Cale stepped forward, his voice steady. "We understand the risks, but we also believe that standing together gives us a chance, not just to survive, but to fight back." Elise studied him for a moment, then smiled faintly, spoken like someone who's seen too many holovids. "But fine, you've got guts, kid. We'll help you." Over the next few days, Cale and Lyra settled into the rebel base, learning its routines and earning the trust of its members. Lyra spent hours teaching Cale about Lumina, sharing stories of its beauty, and the values of harmony and unity that defined her people. In return, Cale helped her understand humanity's resilience and capacity for hope despite adversity. Their bond grew stronger with each passing day, though neither dared admit the feelings stirring between them. Yet, amidst the camaraderie and newfound purpose, tensions simmered beneath the surface. Not everyone in the resistance trusted Lyra, and whispers of dissent spread among the ranks. One evening, as Cale and Lyra sat together in a quiet corner of the base, Elise approached them, her expression grim. "We've intercepted transmissions," she said. "They know where we are. We have maybe a day before they attack." Cale felt a knot tighten in his stomach. "Then we need to prepare." Lyra nodded, her glowing eyes reflecting determination. "We'll stand our ground. Together." As they prepared for the inevitable battle, Cale realized that their journey was far from over. The road ahead would be fraught with challenges, but one thing was certain. No matter what happened, he would protect Lyra, and the hope she represented, with everything he had. The rebel base buzzed with activity as preparations for the impending attack intensified. Cale and Lyra worked side by side, helping to fortify defenses, distribute weapons, and strategize plans. The once chaotic underground hideout transformed into a hive of purposeful energy, each member contributing their skills toward a shared goal. Despite the looming threat, there was an undeniable sense of unity among the rebels, a fragile but powerful bond forged by necessity. For Cale, this new environment felt both exhilarating and overwhelming. He had always been a lone wolf, navigating life on his own terms without relying on others. But here, surrounded by people who trusted him, and whom he began to trust in return, he discovered strength he didn't know he possessed. Lyra noticed the change in him too, often catching glimpses of admiration in her glowing eyes whenever she watched him interact with the rebels. Lyra herself became a source of inspiration for many within the group. Her knowledge of luminous technology proved invaluable, allowing them to modify Earth-based tools with alien enhancements. She also shared insights about the enemy's tactics, teaching the rebels how to counteract their advanced weaponry. Though some members remained wary of her due to her otherworldly nature, most came to respect her determination and courage. One evening, after a long day of training and planning, Cale found himself sitting beside Lyra near the makeshift command center. Dr. Elise Marrow stood nearby, reviewing holographic maps projected onto the wall. The soft hum of machinery filled the air, punctuated by occasional bursts of laughter from other rebels sharing stories over ration packs. "You've changed," Lyra said suddenly, breaking the silence between them. Her voice was gentle, almost hesitant. Cale glanced at her, surprised. "What do you mean?" "You're different now," she explained, her glowing eyes meeting his. "When I first met you, you were just trying to survive. Now, you're fighting for something bigger than yourself." Cale chuckled softly, scratching the back of his neck. "I guess that's what happens when you get dragged into saving two worlds instead of one." "It's more than that," Lyra insisted. "You've embraced it. You care, not just about Earth or Lumina, but about the people around you. That's rare." Her words caught him off guard, stirring emotions he hadn't fully acknowledged until now. Before he could respond, Elise approached, her expression grim. "We've got trouble," she announced, drawing their attention to the holographic map. A series of red markers blinked ominously across the display, indicating increased enemy activity converging on their location. "They're moving faster than we anticipated. We might only have hours before they strike." Tension rippled through the room as the news spread. Rebels scrambled to finalize their preparations, double-checking weapons and reinforcing barricades. Cale exchanged a worried glance with Lyra, knowing that time was running out. Later that night, Cale volunteered to take the first watch, patrolling the perimeter of the base while others rested. As he walked along the dimly lit corridors, his thoughts drifted to the battle ahead. He wasn't afraid of danger. He'd faced it countless times during his career runs. But this felt different. This wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about protecting something worth fighting for. His musings were interrupted when he heard footsteps behind him. Turning quickly, he relaxed upon seeing Lyra approaching, her silver hair shimmering faintly in the low light. "I figured you'd be asleep by now," Cale said, leaning against the wall. "I couldn't," Lyra admitted, joining him. "Too much on my mind." "Me too," Cale replied. After a pause, he added, "Do you think we can win this?" Lyra hesitated, her gaze distant. "I don't know. But I do know that giving up isn't an option, not if we want to protect our worlds." Cale nodded, feeling the renewed sense of resolve. "Then we'll fight like hell." As dawn broke, the calm before the storm settled over the base. Rebels gathered in small groups, exchanging quiet words of encouragement. Cale and Lyra stood together near the main entrance, watching as the horizon brightened with streaks of orange and pink. For a brief moment, it felt like peace might still be possible. But the illusion shattered abruptly when alarms blared throughout the facility. Enemy forces had arrived. The battle erupted with ferocity, the sound of explosions and blaster fire echoing through the narrow streets surrounding the base. The rebels fought valiantly, using every trick they'd learned to hold their ground. Cale wielded a modified rifle, its alien upgrades giving him an edge against the invaders' superior numbers. Beside him, Lyra unleashed bursts of radiant energy, felling enemies with precision and power. Despite their efforts, the tide began to turn against them. The enemy's relentless assault pushed deeper into the base, forcing the rebels to retreat further underground. Amidst the chaos, Cale noticed signs of dissent among some of the rebels, fear and mistrust rearing their ugly heads as casualties mounted. "They're losing faith," Lyra said, her voice strained as she shielded Cale from a blast. "If we don't do something soon, they'll break." Cale clenched his jaw, knowing she was right. He turned to Elise, who was coordinating the defense from a central hub. We need to rally them. If we fall apart now, it's over. Elise nodded, her green eyes blazing with determination. Grabbing a communicator, she addressed the entire group. Listen up. We didn't come this far to give up. Every shot you fire, every step you take, it matters. Together, we can push them back. Her words reignited the rebels' spirit, and they launched a desperate counterattack. Kale led a small team to flank the enemy, creating openings for Lyra to unleash devastating waves of energy. Slowly but surely, they regained momentum, driving the attackers back toward the surface. Yet victory came at a cost. As the dust settled, Kale surveyed the aftermath. Damaged equipment, wounded comrades, and lives lost. Exhaustion weighed heavily on everyone, including Lyra, whose usual glow had dimmed slightly, a sign of her fading strength. Still, amidst the devastation, hope flickered anew. The rebels had survived, proving that unity could overcome even the greatest odds. And as Kale looked at Lyra, standing tall despite her weariness, he knew they were ready for whatever came next. "This isn't the end," Kale said firmly, his voice carrying resolve. "It's just the beginning." Lyra smiled faintly, her glowing eyes reflecting his determination. Together, she agreed, no matter what. With renewed purpose, they prepared for the journey ahead, to cross the stars and reclaim Lumina. Whatever challenges awaited, they would face them side by side, united by a shared vision of peace and hope. The aftermath of the battle left the rebel base in ruins. Charred walls, shattered equipment, and the lingering scent of smoke served as grim reminders of the cost of their victory. Though they had managed to repel the enemy forces, the rebels were far from unscathed. Wounded fighters lay scattered across makeshift medical stations, their groans blending with the hum of emergency lights flickering overhead. The air was heavy with exhaustion and uncertainty. Kale moved through the chaos, helping where he could. He bandaged wounds, carried supplies, and offered words of encouragement to those who needed it most. Despite his efforts, guilt gnawed at him. For every life saved, there was another lost, a reminder that no amount of bravery could erase the scars of war. As he worked, his thoughts kept drifting back to Lyra. She had been at the forefront of the battle, her powers pushing her to the brink of collapse. Yet she refused to rest, insisting on tending to the injured alongside Dr. Elise Marrow. "Kel," a voice called out, snapping him out of his thoughts. It was Elise, her face pale but resolute as she approached him. "We need to talk." Her tone sent a chill down his spine. Following her to a quieter corner of the base, Kel braced himself for bad news. When they stopped, Elise turned to face him, her green eyes sharp and piercing. "There's been a breach," she said bluntly. "Someone leaked our location to the enemy." Kel's stomach dropped. "What? How?" Elise hesitated, her expression darkening. "It wasn't an accident. One of us is working for them. A spy." The revelation hit like a punch to the gut. Trust had been the foundation of their resistance, the glue holding them together in the face of overwhelming odds. If even one person among them was a traitor, it threatened to unravel everything they'd fought so hard to protect. "Do you know who it is?" Kale asked, his voice low. "Not yet," Elise admitted. "But we're running scans on all communication devices. Whoever it is, they won't get away with this." Before Kale could respond, a commotion erupted nearby. Shouts echoed through the corridors as alarms blared once again. Both Kale and Elise sprinted toward the source of the disturbance, hearts pounding. What they found chilled them to the bone. A group of armored figures, more advanced and heavily armed than before, had breached the perimeter. They moved with precision, cutting through defenses as if they'd planned every step. The rebels scrambled to respond, but it was clear they were outnumbered and outmatched. They knew exactly where to strike. Elise muttered under her breath, gripping her weapon tightly. "This isn't random. It's calculated." Kale nodded grimly, his mind racing. If the spy was still inside the base, then their position was compromised beyond repair. They couldn't stay here. Staying meant certain death. "We need to evacuate," Kale said urgently, turning to Elise. "Now." Elise hesitated, glancing around at the wounded and weary rebels. "And go where?" "We're surrounded." Kale clenched his fists, determination hardening his features. "Then we fight our way out. We can't let them win. Not after everything we've done." Elise gave him a curt nod, barking orders to organize a retreat. Meanwhile, Kale searched for Lyra, finding her near the medical bay, using her dwindling energy to stabilize a critically injured rebel. Her hands trembled slightly, a sign of how much strain she was under. "Lyra," Kale said, kneeling beside her, "we have to move. Now." She looked up at him, her glowing eyes dimmer than usual but filled with resolve. "I'm not leaving until everyone's safe. And what good will you be if you burn yourself out trying to save everyone?" Kale countered, his voice firm but tinged with concern. "You're the key to stopping them, remember. Without you, none of this matters." For a moment, Lyra hesitated, torn between duty and self-preservation. Finally, she nodded, allowing Kale to help her to her feet. Together, they joined the others as they prepared to make their stand. The evacuation plan was simple but risky. Create a diversion to draw the enemy away from the main group, giving the majority of the rebels a chance to escape. Someone would have to stay behind to hold the line, a task no one envied. "I'll do it." Kale volunteered without hesitation, stepping forward as the rebels gathered in the central chamber. "No," Lyra protested immediately, grabbing his arm. "You can't. You've done enough already." "And so have you," Kale shot back, his tone unwavering. "Your powers are the only thing keeping us alive right now. If anything happens to you, we lose everything." "I'm not letting that happen." Before Lyra could argue further, Elise interjected. "He's right, Lyra. We need you out there. Kale knows what he's doing. He's fast, resourceful, and smart. He can buy us the time we need." Tears glistened in Lyra's eyes, but she didn't protest again. Instead, she pulled Kale into a tight embrace, her voice barely above a whisper. "Come back to me." Kale smiled faintly, though his heart ached at the thought of leaving her behind. "I promise." As the rebels slipped away through hidden tunnels, Kale positioned himself at a choke point, setting traps and arming himself with whatever weapons he could find. Alone, he waited, listening to the sound of approaching footsteps echoing through the corridor. When the enemy finally appeared, Kale sprang into action. Using his knowledge of the base's layout, he lured them into narrow passages, triggering explosives and collapsing sections of the ceiling to slow their advance. Each explosion bought precious seconds for the others to escape, but it also brought the enemy closer to discovering his position. Memories flashed through Cal's mind as he fought, the countless deliveries he'd made through Neo-Terra's streets, the moments of laughter shared with friends, and the quiet conversations with Lyra that had changed his life forever. He thought about Earth, Lumina, and the hope they represented. Most of all, he thought about Lyra's promise to return to her world and restore peace. Just as he began to run out of tricks, reinforcements arrived unexpectedly. A squad of rebels, led by Elise herself, burst onto the scene, guns blazing. Caught off guard, the enemy faltered, giving Kale the opening. He needed to rejoin the group. "You idiot," Elise scolded as she helped him to his feet. "Did you really think we'd leave you behind?" Kale grinned despite his exhaustion. Guess loyalty runs both ways. Together, they regrouped with the others outside the base, watching as it collapsed into rubble behind them. Though battered and bruised, they were alive, and more united than ever. As Kel spotted Lyra in the crowd, relief washed over him. She ran to him, throwing her arms around him without a word. In that moment, surrounded by allies and bound by shared sacrifice, they knew they were ready for whatever came next. "Our journey isn't over," Lyra said softly, her voice steady, "but we'll face it together." Kale nodded, meeting her gaze with unwavering determination. Together, with renewed purpose, they set their sights on the stars, knowing that the fight for two worlds was just beginning. The rebels stood at the edge of a desolate hangar, their breaths visible in the cold night air. Before them loomed a sleek alien vessel unlike anything Kel had ever seen. Its surface shimmered with an iridescent glow, as if alive, and its design was both elegant and intimidating. The ship belonged to Lyra. It had been hidden in a secure location known only to her, awaiting the moment when it would carry her back to Lumina. "This is our ride," Lyra said, her voice steady despite the fatigue etched into her face. "It's equipped for interstellar travel, but we'll need to move quickly. They'll be looking for us." Cale stared at the ship, awe mingling with apprehension. He had spent his entire life on Earth, navigating its sprawling cities and chaotic streets. The thought of leaving behind everything familiar terrified him, but so did staying behind while Lyra faced danger alone. As he glanced at her, determination replaced fear. Whatever lay ahead, he wouldn't let her face it without him. Dr. Elise Marrow stepped forward, her expression somber yet resolute. "This is where we part ways," she said, addressing the group. "Our fight is here, protecting Earth from further threats. But yours," she turned to Lyra and Cale, her green eyes softening. "Yours is out there among the stars." Several rebels nodded in agreement, though some looked uneasy about letting two of their own venture into the unknown. One by one, they approached Lyra and Cale, offering words of encouragement and gratitude. For many, this farewell felt like the end of an era, the culmination of sacrifices made and bonds forged under extraordinary circumstances. As the final preparations were underway, Cale turned to Elise. "Are you sure about this?" he asked, his tone tinged with guilt. "We've already dragged you into enough trouble." Elise placed a hand on his shoulder, smiling faintly. "You didn't drag us anywhere, hell. We chose to stand with you because what you're fighting for matters, not just for Lumina, but for Earth too. Trust me, staying here is the least we can do." Her words eased some of the weight on Cal's shoulders, but they also reminded him of the stakes. If they failed, both worlds would suffer. With renewed resolve, he boarded the ship alongside Lyra, joining a small crew assembled by the rebels to assist them on their journey. Inside the vessel, technology far beyond human comprehension surrounded them. Panels glowed softly, displaying streams of data in languages Cal couldn't decipher. Seats molded themselves to fit each passenger perfectly, and the hum of the engines resonated like a heartbeat, steady and reassuring. Yet none of these wonders could distract Cal from the enormity of what lay ahead. Lyra guided him to the cockpit, explaining how the controls worked. "This ship operates on principles of energy manipulation," she said, gesturing to the console. "Think of it as riding a wave of light instead of traveling through space." Cale raised an eyebrow. "Riding a wave of light. That sounds complicated." "It is," Lyra admitted with a small smile. "But don't worry, I'll teach you. You'll need to understand how it works if we run into trouble." For hours, she walked him through the basics, patiently answering his questions and demonstrating various functions. Though overwhelmed, Cale soaked up every detail, determined to prove himself capable of handling the challenges ahead. Along the way, Lyra shared stories of Lumina, its shimmering landscapes bathed in perpetual twilight, its crystalline towers that pulsed with energy, and its people who lived in harmony with nature. "It's beautiful," Cale murmured, imagining the world she described. "I wish I could see it someday." "You will," Lyra replied softly, her glowing eyes meeting his. "If we succeed, you'll have saved not just my home, but your own too." Her words lingered in the air, filling Cale with a mix of hope and responsibility. For the first time, he allowed himself to dream of a future where peace reigned across both worlds, a future he might help create. Days passed in relative quiet as the ship traversed vast distances through hyperspace. Outside the windows, stars streaked past like streaks of paint on a canvas, creating an endless panorama of wonder. The crew worked tirelessly, monitoring systems and preparing for the inevitable confrontation awaiting them on Lumina. Among them was a young engineer named Rhea, whose sharp wit and quick thinking earned Cal's respect almost immediately. "Ever flown a spaceship before?" Rhea teased one evening as they reviewed navigation charts together. "Nope," Cal admitted with a grin. "But I'm pretty good at dodging traffic in Neoterra." "Close enough, right?" Rhea laughed, shaking her head. "Let's hope dodging spaceships is easier than hovercars." Their banter provided moments of levity amidst the tension, helping to ease the anxiety building within the group. Still, the shadow of uncertainty loomed large. Each day brought them closer to Lumina, and the tyrants who sought to destroy it. One night, unable to sleep, Cal wandered to the observation deck. There, gazing out at the infinite expanse of space, he found Lyra standing silently, her arms crossed as if shielding herself from the chill. "Can't sleep either?" he asked, stepping beside her. She shook her head. "Too much on my mind." Cal hesitated, then spoke gently. "You're scared, aren't you, about going back?" Lyra sighed, her gaze fixed on the stars. "I left Lumina thinking I'd never return. Now coming back feels like walking into a nightmare. What if I'm not strong enough? What if I fail?" Cal placed a hand on her shoulder, his touch firm yet comforting. "You won't fail. Not with everyone believing in you, including me." Her lips curved into a faint smile, gratitude shining in her eyes. "Thank you, Cal, for everything." They stood there for a while, silence enveloping them as they contemplated the journey ahead. In that moment, Cal realized something important. No matter what happened, he wasn't just fighting for Lumina or Earth, he was fighting for Lyra. And that made all the difference. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the ship emerged from hyperspace, revealing the planet they had traveled so far to reach. Lumina hung suspended in the void, its surface aglow with hues of gold and silver. Towering spires rose from fields of luminous grass, casting ethereal shadows under twin moons. It was breathtakingly beautiful, but scars of war marred its perfection. Dark plumes of smoke billowed from distant cities, and craters dotted the landscape like wounds. The ship descended through Lumina's atmosphere, its sleek hull shimmering as it pierced the golden haze enveloping the planet. Below them, the landscape stretched endlessly. Fields of glowing grass swayed gently under twin moons, their light casting an ethereal glow over crystalline towers and rivers that sparkled like liquid starlight. But amidst this beauty lay devastation. Craters scared the land. Smoke billowed from ruined cities, and eerie silence replaced the hum of life that once thrived here. Cal stared out the viewport, his heart heavy with both wonder and dread. "Is this what they did to your world?" he asked softly, turning to Lyra. Her expression was pained, her glowing eyes reflecting the fractured beauty of her homeland. "Yes," she whispered, "but not all is lost. My people are resilient. They've hidden, waiting for a chance to fight back." As the ship touched down in a secluded valley surrounded by jagged cliffs, Cal and Lyra prepared to disembark. The crew gathered around them, faces etched with determination despite the fear lingering beneath their resolve. This was it, the moment they had been preparing for since leaving Earth. "We'll split into teams," Lyra instructed, her voice steady, but tinged with urgency. "Rhea, you stay with the ship and monitor communications. If things go wrong, you get everyone out safely." Rhea nodded, though her jaw tightened at the thought of staying behind. "Understood." Cal stepped forward, meeting Lyra's gaze. "I'm coming with you." She hesitated, concern flickering across her face. "It's dangerous. You don't have to." "I do," Cal interrupted firmly. "You're not doing this alone. Besides, I've come too far to turn back now." Lyra searched his eyes for a moment before nodding slowly. "All right, but stick close to me." The journey toward the capital city was fraught with tension. The air felt heavier here, charged with the remnants of battles fought and lives lost. Ruins lined their path, remnants of Lumina's once thriving civilization. Survivors emerged cautiously from hiding, their luminous skin dulled by hardship, but still bearing traces of hope when they saw Lyra. "It's her," one whispered, awe mingling with disbelief. "Princess Lyra has returned." Word spread quickly, drawing more survivors to join their cause. Men, women, and even children rallied behind Lyra, armed with makeshift weapons and unwavering determination. Many bore scars, physical and emotional, but none faltered in their resolve to reclaim their home. Kale watched in awe as Lyra addressed the growing crowd, her voice carrying strength and compassion. "Our enemies believe they've broken us," she declared, her glowing eyes blazing with conviction. "But we are Lumina. We are light, unity, and hope. Together, we will rise again." Cheers erupted, echoing through the valley. Kale felt a lump form in his throat. These people weren't just fighting for survival. They were fighting for something greater. And standing beside Lyra, he realized he was part of something bigger than himself. The final leg of their journey led them to the usurper's stronghold, a towering fortress carved into the side of a mountain, its dark spires jutting out like claws against the golden sky. Energy pulses radiated from within, a grim reminder of the core's destructive potential. "This is it," Lyra said, her voice low but resolute. "Once we neutralize the core, the usurpers will lose their power." "And if we fail?" Kale asked, his tone grim. Lyra met his gaze, her expression softening. "Then we'll have given our people a chance to keep fighting. That's all we can ask for." With renewed purpose, they launched their assault. The battle was fierce, the usurpers wielding advanced weaponry powered by the corrupted core. Blasts of energy illuminated the night, shaking the ground beneath their feet. Kale relied on quick reflexes and resourcefulness, using his knowledge of the alien ship systems to disable enemy drones and disrupt communication networks. Lyra fought alongside him, her powers unleashing waves of radiant energy that cut through the chaos. Yet each use drained her visibly, her movements growing slower and less precise. Kale stayed close, shielding her whenever possible, knowing how much depended on her endurance. Finally, after what felt like hours of relentless combat, they reached the heart of the fortress. The core pulsed menacingly before them, a swirling mass of raw energy encased in crystalline walls. Guards stationed nearby opened fire, forcing Kale and Lyra to take cover. "We need to shut it down," Lyra shouted over the din of explosions. "How?" Kale yelled back, dodging a blast. "There's a control panel. It should override the system. I'll distract them while you get to it." Before Kale could argue, Lyra surged forward, unleashing a blinding burst of energy that sent the guards reeling. Seizing the opportunity, Kale sprinted toward the panel, his fingers flying over unfamiliar controls as he worked to decipher the alien interface. Sweat dripped down his brow, and his heart pounded in his chest. One wrong move could trigger a catastrophic explosion. "Come on," he muttered under his breath, his hands trembling as he entered the final sequence. Behind him, Lyra's cries echoed as she struggled to hold off the remaining guards. Just as a blast grazed her shoulder, the core's pulsing slowed, its glow dimming significantly. "It's working," Kale shouted, relief flooding through him. Lyra collapsed to her knees, exhaustion overtaking her. Kale rushed to her side, pulling her into his arms as the fortress trembled around them. "We did it," he whispered, holding her tightly. "You did it." In the days that followed, peace began to return to Lumina. Survivors emerged from hiding, rebuilding their cities and restoring the harmony that had defined their culture. Lyra ascended as ruler, vowing to lead her people with wisdom and compassion. She also forged alliances with Earth, ensuring that humanity would never face the same threats alone. Kale chose to remain by her side, serving as a bridge between their two worlds. Though he missed Neoterra, he found fulfillment in helping Lumina heal, and in being near Lyra. Their bond had grown stronger through shared trials, evolving into something deeper than either had anticipated. One evening, as they stood together beneath the twin moons, Kale turned to Lyra with a smile. "So, what happens now?" Lyra looked at him, her glowing eyes filled with warmth. "Now, we build a future worth fighting for."